Welcome to UO Today. I'm Paul Peppis, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. My guest today is award-winning writer Ben Fountain, author of the short story collection Brief Encounters with Che Guevara and the novel Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, a National Book Award finalist. Fountain has recently written a series of articles for the Guardian newspaper about American politics and the 2016 presidential election. Fountain spoke at the University of Oregon in Eugene and in Portland on May 10th and 11th, 2016. He was the Oregon Humanities Center's 2015-16 Kritikos Lecturer in the Humanities. His talk was the final event in our year-long Justice series. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, your career trajectory is not a standard career trajectory in our moment. You didn't get an MFA at a writing program. Tell us a little bit of that story, how you came to be a writer.
Well, I wouldn't wish that career trajectory on anybody. And I'm thinking someday I'll write an article called How to Get a Book Contract in Only 17 Years, because that's how long it took me to get a book contract. I practiced law for 5 years and was about to turn 30 and had this notion that I wanted to try to write for a long time. And I think one reason I went to law school and started practicing law was maybe I would just forget about writing because it scared me. It seemed like the hardest thing to do and the thing that I might really fail at. But, after 8 years of being in law school and practicing law, I guess it was a powerful thing in me because, I quit practicing law and started writing. And my wife was on board with it. I had told her on our first date in law school that I had no intention of practicing law my whole life, although I didn't really mean it. But anyway, I started writing, and it was like first grade all over again. And I would publish a short story every now and then. But and then after 5 or 6 years, I had a novel, and I got an agent for it. Novel didn't sell. The agent dropped me. More stories, another novel, didn't sell. So about 10 years in, I was turning 40 and really didn't have much to show for that 10 years of effort. And I had to decide, well, are you going to keep going, or are you going to go to business school and just make money, like everybody else? And I thought, no, I like what I'm doing. I believe in it. I think I'm getting better. And so I'll just keep doing it. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm raising my kids. So I got very zen about it. And it seems like at that point, the writing went up a couple of clicks. I just kind of let go of all those, illusions of success and writerly fantasies and just thought, I'll just work. I'll just write. So, but it took another 7 years to get a book contract. So again, for anyone out there thinking of writing, I hope you have better luck than I did. Or I hope you're smarter than I was.
Oh, those years made you a great writer. You're a great writer.
Well, thank you very much. I think I'm a work in progress very much.
We all are that. The collection, the short story collection, Brief Encounters with Che Guevara, includes a series of stories about Americans in various locations abroad. Myanmar, Haiti, Colombia. And it was extremely well received. You're compared to Joseph Conrad and Graham Greene. That's pretty formidable comparisons. Why did you get into those particular situations? What drew you to Americans, good-intentioned Americans in way over their heads?
Right. I'm not sure I can give a rational answer to that. That's one of the great things about doing this kind of work is you just follow your head and your heart wherever they lead you. And I've been writing for a few years, and I found myself gravitating towards these kinds of things. These are the things I was interested in that puzzled me, that seemed mysterious to me. And I started going to Haiti out of this sense of there's a whole nother reality out there. I mean, we have the middle-class American reality where things are fairly stable and secure. But then there's this other reality out there that 2 or 3 billion people on the planet live. And these are people who are living on $1 or $2 a day. And I just felt like I need to go and see that and try to understand and try to engage in a serious way. And so, I started going to Haiti and just started following, my heart and my head, just trying to explore these kinds of situations.
Tell us about how you got from that place to deciding to write Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, which is not about Americans abroad at all. So where'd you come up with this idea?
Well, in a way it is about Americans who've been abroad and they happen to be back, for 2 weeks in America. And because of what they've been through in Iraq, certainly Billy Lynn is seeing things through fresh eyes, through new eyes. He's looking at his country in a different way. He's almost looking at it as a foreigner would look at it. But I think generally you could say I'm drawn to situations that involve power and politics and race and just these big systems and the way individuals try to eke out a little bit of autonomy in the midst of those big systems. So anyway, in 2004, it was right after Bush was elected. I know some people would say reelected, but I'd gone into fairly profound depression. I mean, I just couldn't understand how the country had affirmed the course we were on, because by then we all knew there were no weapons of mass destruction, that Iraq had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda or 9/11. I mean, it was, anyway, it was Thanksgiving, 2004, and we had a lot of people over at the house, and we had the Dallas Cowboys game on. Halftime show came on. Everybody walks out. But I'd had a couple of martinis, and I'm sitting there on the couch, and I'm watching this halftime show, and it's the most insane thing I've ever seen. And I really started paying attention to it, and basically it's pretty much the way I write it in the book. I'm not doing satire in the book. At no point am I doing satire. I'm just reporting. I'm just a straight up realist. And so really seeing that halftime show, that was the spark. I thought, there's a story there. And if I'm smart, maybe I can tease it out.
It's wonderful that you say that thing about satire, because the book has been called The Catch-22 of Iraq. And when I read that and read the book, it's like, no, this is not like Catch-22. Every character is absolutely authentic. There's no caricature anywhere in this book. It's just that American life itself is absurd.
It's a blown up version of I don't know, it's just, you can't outdo it. I think the best you can do, and it's perfectly fine and honorable, is to report on it, lay it out there. And if there's satire, it's because the material satirizes itself.
Would you mind reading us a passage from the novel?
I'd be happy to.
You want to just set up where we're going to enter?
Well, Billy Lynn is a 19-year-old soldier from Texas, and he and his squad were filmed performing heroically in Iraq, filmed by a Fox News crew. That footage goes viral. The Bush administration seizes on this footage to bring Billy and his squad mates back to the U.S. for a 2-week victory tour. And the book takes place on the last day of the tour at Texas Stadium, Thanksgiving Day game, Cowboys. And so I'm going to read you a passage where Billy and the Bravos, including Sergeant Dime, are at the Stadium Club, which is like the country club of Texas Stadium, with all the well-heeled fans, and they're having Thanksgiving Day lunch. They're interrupted by a Stadium Club patron who wants to say hello. By the way, there's some bad words in here. That's okay. All right. It's never the young or middle-aged men who stop to speak, but always the older guys, the Silverbacks secure in the fact that they're past their fighting prime. They thank the soldiers for their service. They ask how is lunch. They offer praise for such assumed attributes as tenacity, aggressiveness, love of country. This particular patron, a fit, ruddy fellow with some black still in his hair, introduces himself with a lavish trawling of vowels that comes out sounding like How Wayne. Soon he's telling them about the bold new technology his family's oil company uses to juice more crude out of the Barnett Shale, something to do with salt water and chemical fracturing agents. Some of my friends' kids are serving over there with you, Hal Wayne tells them. So it's a personal thing with me, boosting domestic production, lessening our dependence on foreign oil. I figure the better I do my job, the sooner we can bring you young men home. Thank you, Sergeant Dime responds. That's just excellent, sir. We certainly do appreciate that. I'm just trying to do my part. And that was cool, Billy will later reflect. If Hal Wayne had just said, enjoy your meal like everybody else, and returned to his lucrative patriotic life. But no, he got greedy. He had to squeeze just a little bit more from Bravo. So, he says, just from your own perspective, how do you think we're doing over there? How are we doing? Dime echoes brightly. Just from our own perspective? The Bravos fold their hands and look down at their plates, though several can't help smiling. Well, it's a war, Dime continues in that same bright voice, which is by definition an extreme situation, people trying very hard to terminate each other. But I'm far from qualified to speak to the big picture, sir. All I can tell you with any confidence is that the exchange of force with intent to kill, that is truly a mind-altering experience, sir. I'm sure, Hal Wayne is gravely nodding. I can imagine how hard it is on you young men. To be exposed to that level of violence? No, Dime interrupts. That's not it at all. We like violence. We like going lethal. I mean, isn't that what you're paying us for? To take the fight to America's enemies and send them straight to hell? If we didn't like killing people, then what's the point? You might as well send in the Peace Corps to fight the war. Aha, Hal Wayne chuckles, though his smile has lost some wattage. I guess you've got me there. Listen, you see these men? Dime gestures around the table. I love every one of these mutts like a brother. I bet I'll love them more than their mamas even, but I'll tell you frankly, and they know how I feel, so I can say this right in front of them. But just for the record, this is the most murdering bunch of psychopaths you'll ever see. I don't know how they were before the Army got them, but you give them a weapons system and a couple of ripped fuels, and they'll blast the hell out of anything that moves. Isn't that right, Bravo? Yes, Sergeant! They answer instantly with gusto. Throughout the restaurant, dozens of well-coiffed heads whip around. See what I mean? Dime chortles. They're killers. They're having the time of their lives. So if your family's oil company wants to frack the living shit out of the Barnett Shale, that's fine, sir. That's absolutely your prerogative. But don't be doing it on our account. You've got your business, and we've got ours. So you just keep on drilling, sir, and we'll keep on killing. Hal Wayne opens his mouth and flaps his jaw once or twice, but nothing comes out. His eyes have receded deep into his head. Behold, Billy thinks, the world's most mind-fucked millionaire. I've got to go, Hal Wayne mumbles, glancing around as if checking his escape route. Don't talk about shit you don't know, Billy thinks. And therein lies the dynamic of all such encounters. The Bravos speak from the high ground of experience. They are authentic. They are the real. They have dealt much death and received much death and smelled it and held it and slopped through it in their boots, had it spattered on their clothes and tasted it in their mouths. That is their advantage, and given the masculine standard America has set for itself, it is interesting how few actually qualify. Why we fight? Who is this we? Here in the chicken hawk nation of blowhards and bluffers, Bravo always has the ace of bloods up its sleeve.
Thank you so much. Wonderful passage.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So the thing that Billy realizes, you have to know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. You're not a veteran.
No.
You write this book, which is in the mind of this one 19-year-old soldier. The majority of the novel, he's with the rest of Bravo. You spoke about the language. The language is salty throughout. It feels utterly authentic. I know the book has attracted the attention of veterans groups. How did you do it? How did you learn to think and write and channel so authentically the experience of these soldiers?
Well, I appreciate that. And to the extent I was successful, I would say that it's the result of a lot of work. I mean, I approach this with a lot of trepidation and a lot of respect. I think anytime you're dealing with matters of blood, of life and death, it's a serious thing. And it's not like I woke up one morning and thought, well, la-ti-da, I think I'll write about soldiers in this war. I had the notion for the story in 2004. I didn't start writing until 2009. I was working on other things. But my default reading for those 5 years, whenever I didn't have anything else that I needed to read or really wanted to read, it was always about these wars. You know, all the books, all the memoirs, all the magazine articles, all the newspaper articles. And, you know, after 5 years, I had a stack of stuff, you know, yay high. And I talked to all the soldiers who had talked to me. I talked to soldiers' families. And when you do this kind of work, also, you start to realize, well, maybe you know more than you realized you knew. And I started thinking about it, and I've known veterans of all American wars going back to World War I. Things come to you. But also, I think, you know, I had a real obligation to try to get it right. I had to earn the right to write this book. And so I worked very hard to try to do that.
Well, I think you succeeded, and I'm not the only one who thinks you've succeeded. It was very well received, highly awarded, and perhaps the crowning accomplishment in our world, in our country, which the novel itself focuses on. One of the things that's going on this day is that there's a Hollywood film producer who's attached himself to Bravo, and he's trying to cut a deal to make this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the novel is being made into a movie. It's going to be released, if everything goes according to plan, on Veterans Day. It's directed by very esteemed director Ang Lee. It's got some big names, big talents have been attached. That's one of the topics that comes up again and again in the novel. How do you feel about that? That extra textual irony that you, in fact, among many of the things that come under scrutiny in the novel is Hollywood and the way, you know, their role in this. How do you feel about the fact that it's being made into a film? Well,
just from an aesthetic point of view, I take it as a sign that maybe I was getting a few things right, in the sense of, well, naturally, you know, any story like the Bravo story, and I'm talking about in real life, you know, the culture is going to attach itself to it if it generates a certain amount of heat, and the movies are going to come calling. But the movies, being the movies, their attention span tends to, you know, be on a fairly quick fuse. So when the movies came calling, I have to say my main reaction was bemusement. Let's see where this thing goes. And amazingly, it has just continued to go on and on and on. So I have very little to do with the movie. I'm an interested observer, no more than that, and I'm curious to see what they come up with.
We are all curious. There are many parts of the novel where I thought, oh my God, what an amazing film it would make, but a challenging film also. So much of it is happening in Billy's head, and
right.
I'm very curious to see how they're going to solve that.
Right, and Ang Lee, I think that's his challenge, is to bring that interiority out in a way that's shown externally, visually. And so, thank God it's his problem, not my problem.
So, you are, in addition to being a novelist and a fiction writer, you're also a teacher of writing. How do you approach that problem? How would you say, what are you trying to communicate to your students? How are you trying to help them not have the career trajectory that you had?
Well, first of all, I want to emphasize to them that if they're trying to write fiction, or trying to write poetry, or trying to write, you know, serious nonfiction, this is important work. It's very important work. And even if we're at a point in our culture where this kind of work seems to be quite devalued, and in fact, everything against the culture is pushing against that kind of path, you know, toward a more utilitarian, money-making path. I try to emphasize to them that, no, the work you're doing is important. And even if the work at this moment you're doing doesn't seem important, nobody's paying attention, it's feeble, it's lame, it's weak, that's the work you have to do to get to the point where you may do something significant. So, I mean, writers are on a different clock than most people. And then we go to work, and we read a lot of stories, we take them apart, we we start at the level of the sentence and try to work our way up. And really, I mean, the main thing about writing is writing. I mean, 90% of what you're going to learn, you have to learn by yourself, writing. But there are a few things a teacher can help you with, and a community of writers can help you with. And certainly in an MFA program, I think one of the great benefits to that is it gives you cover for a couple of years from, your parents, or just the wider culture. You aren't out there in limbo. You have a place, a validated place in the culture for a few years at least, and so you can develop. You have that time to develop.
So you said that you say to them, what you're doing matters. I'm an English professor. I'm at a cocktail party. Someone says, what do you do? I say, I'm an English professor. They say invariably either why or I better watch my grammar. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
This matters. Why does it matter? Help me. This is every time I get a writer, I ask this question because this is the question that I always am trying to explain to people. Literature, the humanities matter. Why? Why do they matter?
Well, an obvious answer: critical thinking, dealing with language, getting below the surfaces of things, learning how to look on life and on the things people say and write and do with a critical eye, with an engaged brain. I think there are a few things better for teaching that than literature. On an even more fundamental level, I would say, without a valid language, a vital language that stays true to reality, to the way things are, then I think we're like, individually we're like, the blind man stumbling around the room, and on a societal level as well. If we don't have the tools for perceiving reality, for clear seeing, clear thinking, and then having the language that honestly and accurately portrays that reality, then we might as well be living in a commercial, Then, if we don't have literary language, the language of reality, then the alternative, I think, is the language of advertising, the language of lies, delusions, and fantasies. And you can live in a lie, a delusion, or a fantasy for a while, but sooner or later reality comes for you. And I think it's in those moments in our lives when we have a crisis, those existential moments where we're faced with, the death of a loved one, or sickness, or failure, in our work, or difficulty in our marriage or with children, when we're thrown back on ourselves. And reality has come for us. Okay, are we going to have the tools for dealing with it? And I think literature is one of the best repositories of wisdom and just collective knowledge that we have.
Well said. Speaking of lies, delusions, and fantasies, you're currently writing a series of articles for The Guardian about the American presidential race and the political process. Tell us about what you're trying to do there.
Well, I'm trying to make sense of it. I mean, for myself. I think we're in uncharted territory. And I think there has never been someone like Trump on this scale, at this level, in American politics. And he is a genuine phenomenon. And I don't think he came out of nowhere. I think we as a society and a political system have been building toward this moment for a long time. And so in these pieces I'm writing for The Guardian, one thing I didn't want to do was opinionate. And you look at so many of the pundits, and you get the feeling they wrote their columns in 5 minutes. And am I knocking them? Yeah, I'm knocking them. And so I'm going back into history and trying to give some kind of spine or backbone to whatever analysis I can bring to the current situation. And if for no other reason, I'm trying to get my own head around this Trump thing.
Well, I read the most recent one, which it's at the first game of the season. That's where you're talking about baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And you wind up talking about the history of American politics and American exceptionalism. It's actually an amazing piece of literary writing to try to get at these problems of what's going on in American politics by talking about America's greatest game.
Well, it's all connected.
Yeah.
And I didn't know going into it. I mean, the editor said, why don't you write something about American exceptionalism? I was like, oh, okay. There's a lot of that around. And he said, opening day of the baseball season is coming up. Could you put those two things together? And I said, I bet I can. I mean, just, American culture being the way it is, I bet all I have to do is dig a little bit. And sure enough, out came Walt Whitman and Abraham Lincoln, yep, and the Puritans. And and without much effort on my part. I mean, all that stuff is there, and I think a big part of it is just taking the time to go and read and think, and just try to put some effort into it.
So we've got about a minute left. My last question: are you working on anything new? Any new novel, new fiction?
Yeah, I've always got some short stories cooking along. I'm working on the Guardian pieces, and maybe those will turn into a book after the election is over. And I'm in the big middle of a novel set in Haiti. I'm about 400 pages of a first draft into it, and maybe about 80 of those pages are any good. But it takes place in 1991 in Haiti, and it deals with race and power and politics and scuba diving and voodoo and quantum physics and family and sex and death and everything else.
Everything is in it, just like in Billy Lynn. We're really looking forward to whenever you complete that novel. Thank you, Ben, for taking the time to speak with us. It's been really a pleasure.
Thank you, Paul.
I've been speaking with Ben Fountain, author of the short story collection Brief Encounters with Che Guevara and the novel Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk. Fountain spoke at the University of Oregon in Eugene and in Portland on May 10th and 11th, 2016. He was the Oregon Humanities Center's 2015-16 Kritikos Lecturer in the Humanities. His talk was the final event in the year-long Justice Series. Thanks so much for watching.